Hello, Craig and Dave Unscripted Part 3. So if you were watching the last one, we took a bit of a trip down memory lane, Dave. More Dave's memory than mine, I recall. Because as we pointed out, Dave is older than me, fact. But we left around 1988, 1989. So we are going to pick Era 3, we're calling it. Era 3, 1988, 1989. Why don't you start, Dave? And then we can jump back and forth, because I have fond memories of lots of this now. So, hey.
Yeah, sure. Well, 1988. So I was, about 14 years old at this point, and I'd given up my paper round because the milkman had convinced me that I could earn more money if I delivered pints of milk with him instead. He wasn't really allowed to have, child workers.
Yeah.
But he wanted help and I wanted cash, so that was great. So he would pay me about £15 to help him on a Saturday. Wow. Delivering milk, and so I would do that from sort of 5 o'clock in the morning to sort of like 10, half 10 in the morning, and I'd get £15 for that. And with that £15, I would go with my friends into town and we'd go down to the arcades.
Now we're talking.
My parents would not have approved of this at all, because I think they would have seen this as a complete waste of money for a start. But in these arcades, you had the fruit machines kind of at the front, and you had these gaming machines at the back. And we weren't really allowed in these arcades because we were too young, being at like 14, 15 years old. So we would kind of sneak in and try and get past the cashier before they noticed and get down to the gaming machine, because we weren't interested in the fruit machines. We knew that our money would just disappear very, very quickly on those fruit machines. But with these arcade machines, for 20p, we could have a good time for 5 minutes or so, and then put another 20p in and whatnot. And so we used to spend our earnings that we got from the milkman down in the arcades on the Saturday.
And of course, this is effectively the first idea of like the console. Before the console became a thing that you all had in your home, you would go down and last time we were talking about what the ZX Spectrums and BBC Micros, but this a dedicated, serious piece of kit. We're talking up to sort of 15, 16 megahertz now, like 16 million operations in a second, and something else quite significant now. Do you want to mention it? CISC architecture.
The CISC architecture. Well, the CISC architecture had come in on the micros that we talked about in the last episode as well. But this was the first sort of 16-bit, 16-bit word sizes on your arcade machines here. And again, because they had dedicated hardware, they would make a board to play a particular game. It was dedicated to that game. And so obviously, not only was it 16-bit, not only was it 16 megahertz, but you had the hardware that was written specifically and optimized specifically for this game. So of course, it blew anything that you had at home clean out the water. And this is why we were so keen to get down to the arcades, because this is where the quality was. But the CISC architecture, it is worth a mention because RAM was so expensive and you didn't have a lot of it due to the technological limitations, economic limitations, all sorts of things, and so the CISC architecture, the complex instruction set computer, was kind of born out of this idea that we wanted to minimize the amount of RAM that our instructions were actually going to hold. And so the CISC architecture became a thing. Now, as it happened, and we'll talk about this probably in another video at some point, but the RISC architecture was a better idea. But because of the limitations, you had to have a CISC architecture. And it's interesting that we're now seeing, the legacy CISC architecture still on PCs today, but they are gradually being replaced with ARM architectures, which are RISC based. Anyway, I've gone off into some theory.
Of course, what a lot of people probably won't realize, little sidebar here, is this really is where the birth of e-gaming is. You probably think e-gaming is a new modern thing, watching world championships, Overwatch and StarCraft tournaments. But not so much in this country, but in America, sure, more niche. But there were national competitions based around arcade games. kids, teenagers were pouring to these arcade games because you couldn't get anything like this, and there were competitions with money. You know, this was the birth of esports, arcade machines and arcade
oh
boards.
yeah, and you could get some real notoriety because 20p was only supposed to, you know, at the end of the day, these were expensive to make, and they were there to make money for the arcades. And so when you put 20p in, you weren't supposed to complete the game on 20p.
No.
You were supposed to put, you know, another 20p in, you know, 2 or 3 minutes later, and keep doing that. That's how these games worked.
But game over or pay for another life.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, this idea of you put another coin in and you can continue from where you were. Yeah, absolutely right. And so that was what was kind of encouraging you to carry on playing. But you could get some real notoriety if you could get good at these games. And there were also certain little cheats and things. And some of them weren't cheats; they were just bugs, really, I suppose, little exploits that you could sort of work in your favor. But some of these games were like 3-player. I mean, I remember Super Sprint was amazing. 3-player, had steering wheels. And then you had Hot Rod was 4-player, Gauntlet was 4-player, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was 4-player.
I remember that. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. You couldn't do that at home. That was the thing.
Right, this could be a whole video on arcade games, so let's move on because I've just all sorts of things have popped into my head. But of course, this was also the era, and I'll get onto this in a minute, but you can go first, of actually having a computer room in a school. I mean, you think that's ridiculous, guys. You've got 4 or 5 suites and computers in the back of every classroom, and every office has got one, but this was something, a computer suite.
Yeah, it was. So I was in what you would now call year 10 and 11, although we called it year 4 and 5 back in those days. And
in your day,
we'd gone from a single BBC Micro in the school to having about as many as you can see on the screen there. That's kind of typical of the computer room. And I was able to choose as an option information technology. Amazing. Now, when I say I was able to choose information technology, which was a no-brainer, I was always going to choose that option over anything else. What that gave me was word processing and videotex. Okay, now let me briefly explain that. When I say word processing, what I mean is typing words on that keyboard and then printing them. And if you wanted to change the font, you would go to the printer and select the font on the printer that you wanted it to print it in. This is how simplistic we're talking about. And I got a little qualification on being able to word process on a BBC microcomputer. And Videotex, I don't. Do you remember CFAX, Craig?
Yes. No, CFAX. Yes, I'm alive at this point. I'm at least 10 or 11 now.
Right. Well, we won't go into what CFAX is all about because we could do another video on that. But creating CFAX pages was the thing that I would then do, and that's how I got my Videotex certificate as part of this qualification.
Well, I don't have a huge amount to add at this point. I mean, I'm around 10 at this point, 10 or 11. So I think sort of last year of primary school. So you call that year 6 now. Now being a primary school, I've still got no exposure to a computer room. Dave's lording it up in his secondary school with an entire computer suite. My primary school, as I left in year 6, had 2 computers. They were these computers, I think, as well. One in the head's office and one in the PA's. That was it. The idea of having a computer suite. Of course, that was all about to change when I went to secondary school. But this brings us on to the 1990s to 94. Talk about space age now. Right, let's flip back to you then, Dave, because I've got lots of little anecdotes here. But yeah, the RM Nimbus. This was the school computer of choice, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, exactly. I'm not sure of the entire history of this one, but certainly with the BBC Micro, because the BBC were pushing it and they were kind of getting it out into schools, it became the computer of choice for schools. Way too expensive for most people to own at home, which is why you had the Commodores and the Spectrums and the Amstrads and things like that. A couple of people had BBCs, but you'd have to be really rich to have one of those. But yeah, the RM Nimbus, this is a 186, okay?
Yeah.
And Craig will explain what that is in a minute, but it's a 186. And so this is the first PC. Okay, this is, the 16-bit era is here. and this was amazing. This was my very first computer network. And so with these RM Nimbuses, you could actually join them together in a bus network, and you could do some networking things with them that you could never have done before. Now, these were running MS-DOS, which is before Windows. And I do remember seeing Windows 1 for the very first time on one of these machines. And I remember saying at the time, that Windows thing is a waste of time. Because I can do everything I need to do in DOS. Now, bear in mind, DOS could only run one program at a time as well. There was no multitasking. I could do everything I needed to do in DOS. And I remember seeing Windows and saying, there's no point in that. You spend far too long moving things around and clicking on stuff. You don't need any of that.
If you're anything like me at this point as well, because obviously you've been interested in computers and programming in BASIC, like we said in the last video, for a while, you probably knew more than whoever the technical expert was at school. And if you're anything like me, I got made like a student tech administrator,
Yeah, I can trump you with this one, actually. I think we need to do a separate video just on our favorite teachers, okay? Because otherwise I will end up talking too much about a particular teacher. But yeah, we got given, and our I was doing A-levels at this point, and our computer science teacher, I was doing A-level computing, he thought it would be a good idea for the students, the A-level students, to just run the network. And this was a day before technicians, this was the students running the network. And when you say we knew more than he did, I don't know if that's true, but he certainly gave us the impression that was the case. And he gave us, where I can trump you is, he gave us a cupboard in the computer room, and he said, you can do what you need to do with that. So we took one of the computers out of the computer room, we put it in the cupboard, and we turned it into our office. This is students, bear in mind.
You haven't trumped me on that. I'll get onto mine in a minute. This is great, because Dave has this is bringing back memories. You've not trumped me. I cannot wait to get onto my bit.
Shall I tell you, though, how I learned about bus networks?
Yeah, go on.
I learned by building that little network in that room. And what we used to do is we'd be like, what's that little terminator on the end of the bus network? We didn't know what it was for. So we'd just take it off. We'd be like, what's this thing? Take it off. Suddenly the network would crash, and we'd be like, oh my goodness, that's quite important. We better put that back on. And we learned by doing. It was amazing.
Between the old little T connectors and terminators.
Yeah.
I mean, right, okay. Anyway.
Hang on.
Look at that.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry,
I've got one thing. The server, because of course now we had a bus network, we also had a server. That server had 60 megabytes of storage. 60 megabytes. That's for all the users, all their files, all the applications, everything. Wow, 60 megabytes. Bonkers. Anyway, meanwhile, back at home.
Yeah, you were saying there, look at that, a graphical user interface. Now, we're not talking Windows 1 here, but this was your picture, I believe. So did you own an Amiga, or was it just something you were aware of?
Do you think I was wealthy enough to own an Amiga? Come on.
I did.
Who do you think owned an Amiga? My mate.
Of course he did. Right. I don't know who this mate is, but he's got all the tech, isn't he?
He has got all the tech, yeah. He was always one step ahead. It was annoying.
Yeah, so this wasn't Windows. It was Amiga, but it was called Workbench. That was it. Workbench for Amiga. And you actually had... Sorry, I've kind of interjected and taken over your section. But you had to load up this... graphical user interface, what you guys think of as an operating system, by putting in the Amiga Workbench boot disk. It was the program that you chose to load up. Now you turn on PC and up pops Windows 10 or whatever it is you're using. But back then it was like, no, do I want to play a game, or do I want to use the graphical operating system interface? Pop it in, boot it up, and look at that. Systems tray and a utilities tray and a trash can, and it's basic, but look, calculator app, minimize and maximize buttons. I mean, resizable windows. It is still what people are used to today from an operating system, to a large extent.
Look at that thing you've got on the right-hand side there.
What this? The mouse?
What is that? What is that sorcery you have?
I have no idea. Obviously, modern gamers have like a laser LCD mouse like this. But yeah, back then that was a mouse.
And you could get them. I mean, on the BBC Micro, for example, you could get a mouse. I think they were invented in about 1984. But on your home PC, this was a revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to say about that one? Did you own a games console? Come on.
Yeah. so what happened there was that by now I had a part-time job at a supermarket, doing my A-levels, just finishing my A-levels, and so I had much more money, but I was actually kind of losing interest in computers, if I'm honest. The golden era was over, really, in a sense, because I was 16, 17, coming up to 18 years old, and I had other interests, which, involved girls. And, I just, computers, it was a bit geeky. And whilst that inner nerd was always there, I was just finding cooler things to do. But, the Mega Drive, oh my goodness, a 16-bit machine in your home. It was graphics like we'd never seen. The moment I saw Sonic the Hedgehog, I was like, I have to have one of these things. And so, so I bought myself a Mega Drive, and the gamepad, the little controller that you've got with it there, 2-player. And I remember Sonic the Hedgehog was massive. And of course, Sega had been trailing Nintendo for quite some time, because Nintendo had Mario. And there were, other games consoles like the Nintendo Entertainment System, things like that, that just completely passed me by, because I wasn't really interested in that angle of computer science at all. But the Mega Drive was massive, because it was Sega's answer to Nintendo's Super Mario, and I absolutely loved it. What I couldn't fathom, because of course I have been programming games for a little while at this point, what I couldn't fathom was how fast it executed. I mean, the speed that Sonic moved around that map,
that was mind-blowing, wasn't it?
I just, even now, I kind of watch documentaries on YouTube about the collision detection mechanics on Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'm still blown away at the speed that this thing was actually operating at. But Mortal Kombat, I don't know if you remember Mortal Kombat.
I do. Well, this is the era the first Mortal Kombat game came out.
Mortal Kombat, the first time you could literally rip someone's head off, which isn't true, actually.
Do I remember it? Yes.
Because I remember Barbarian on my Amstrad C464, and you could do, it was a game where you were both 2-player, 2 barbarians, and you had swords, and with one particular move you could lop the other character's head off, which was immense fun, but you had to time it perfectly. You could lop their head off, and what would happen is the corpse would obviously drop to the floor, and so would the head, which would bounce on the floor a little bit, and a little character, I can't even remember what it was now, but a little character would come on the screen and it would kick the head off the screen. And of course we thought this was hilarious. But when Mortal Kombat came along, this was execution to a whole new level.
Finishing, that's it. And that's a whole nother video. Violence in computer games, has it gone too far? But yeah, it started back here in 1990. Right. Anything more to say on that? No, brilliant. So finally, I'm of an age now. Yeah. So what, I don't know, 11 to 13, 14 in this period. So again, RM Nimbus is in school. I think we've got a couple of computer rooms, maybe one. But the only program we were allowed to use, and it was this really frustrating program for writing little kind of music, bits of music for our music lessons. And it was all clinky and bleepy. And I tried to find a screenshot of the program, despite the internet. I couldn't find it. But yeah, like you, obviously I'd come from, I'm into BASIC, and I've written computer programs in primary school and all this kind of stuff. Before I knew it, I was made a network admin along with a bunch of other lads who are older than me in I think year 10 or 11, and we were given a little cupboard Yeah, we were good in the cupboard. I think and the guy was called Mr. Reynolds. There you go. Shout out to Mr. Reynolds if you are still around. I thought that guy was a legend. Basically gave us keys to that cupboard. Now I realise we were running his network while he was off having a cigarette in the smoker's cabin, which is another thing teachers can't do on school anymore. But back then they had a smoker's cabin. And I would run the net. Oh, loved it. So yeah, what did I do with this newfound sense of power and responsibility, Dave?
Something very mature and sensible, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, the only program we were allowed to use was this music one. But no, it didn't take too long before me and these 15, 16-year-olds had installed Merlin's Castle on the one computer room in the school. It was one computer room. Yeah, no one ever found out. So, Mr. Reynolds, if you are watching this now, I apologize. But yeah, we installed Merlin's Castle, and look at that running on RM Nimbus. And we just thought that was the height of everything. But I wanted to finish off by mentioning the Amiga to kind of finish the 1994 era, because you mentioned that earlier. In the last video, I said my first gaming PC was the Spectrum 128K, Spiky Harold, Buggy Boy. For Christmas, several years later, I want to say around 1992-ish, mine and my brother's parents bought us the Amiga Batman pack. And that is it. I searched for the Batman pack on the internet, and that is the exact image. And this was a gaming PC. I was blown away by this. It was called the Batman pack because obviously it was dropping this, you know, the latest game by Ocean. That was the gaming company. Look at that compared to the graphics we were showing last week on Submarine. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And this was in my hands in my living room. Me and my brother used to fight over who could get to play this. An Amiga 500, Dave, because it was 500k of onboard memory, half of 1 meg of onboard memory. The PC I've got now has 64 gig of memory in it.
See, my friends still have better computers than me, even now. Now.
An Amiga 500k. But wait, one final thought. It gets better. After owning this Amiga for a year, we discovered, do you know what that is?
Some kind of expansion board?
That's exactly what it is. That was expanding the Amiga's memory. That is a 512k upgrade card. I've got 64 gig in this machine, and there was one massive slot. You had to turn the whole thing upside down. There was one slot. You took it out, you plugged it in, and you turned your Amiga 500 into an Amiga 1000, 1 meg of onboard memory. Yeah, that was it.
That's brilliant. I mean, my memory of the Amiga, because I was kind of coming out of my computing era at that point. My mate bought an Amiga, I remember Blood Money. That was a great game. I remember Menace. That was a great game. But Lemmings.
Oh, we could speak for ages on this. I don't even have a screenshot. If you don't know what Lemmings is, just YouTube it or Google it. I spent hours. Of course, it was so popular. Out comes Lemmings 2, the Lemmings Christmas edition where they had the little Christmas hats on.
Amazing.
Yes. I tell you what, I'm almost positive you can download Lemmings as a fully fledged graphical game on tablets these days.
Oh,
I'm
for sure.
fairly sure. Yeah. Right.
I mean, we could do a whole video on how you can make a 15 by whatever it was, 15 by, I can't remember, 15 by 8 pixel. How you can make 15 by 8 pixels look like a character and give it personality. I mean, that would be interesting. But just before we finish, what did your parents think of this? Did they encourage this journey of computer science? What was their perspective?
So mine did, but that's because thinking back now, at the time I wouldn't have realized it. I have a father who is quite forward in his technology. Back at the time, he worked for Lloyd's TSB, and his role was working in the computer tape storage department in the head office in London. So, of course, when I said I wanted to get a computer, he was like, fine, you know. So he would load tapes. I mean, we can talk about that at another point, the evolution of storage. That's the whole video. He would load tapes. So, you know, he wasn't a programmer or anything like that, but he kind of worked in the IT department of Lloyd's TSB at the time. So yeah, he was quite supportive, especially when I started, like, there's my first computer program. He had no idea what I was doing, but it's like, you wrote that. So they were quite supportive and in that. And I think my dad was a bit of a techie's not the right word, but he was kind of pro technology in the early days of that, because that was the environment he worked in. So yeah.
Yeah, because my dad was a painter and decorator originally, and then he got a job at Doughty's. I'm not sure what he did. Even now, I'm not entirely sure what he did. But something to do with computing and the early computing. And he rose through the ranks. And in the end, I think he was sort of international director of IT at Messier Doughty, and then GE Aviation eventually before he retired. But so he never got involved actually with me with the computers. He let me sort of get on with it, but never showed a real active interest. But my mum, on the other hand, now she had views. So she was it was curious because she was sort of anti-computer, yet she bought me computers for Christmas, and I think it's because she wanted me to have the best, you know, the best childhood I could have, with, you know, within their financial constraints, and she certainly achieved that. But she would not like me playing games, and but she was instrumental in me being involved in computer science, because I remember her saying to me one day, all you do is play games. Yes, ma'am. Why don't you write the games, and then I would be more impressed. And I it wasn't, those weren't the exact words, but it was words to that effect. And I thought, oh yeah. And it was at that moment that I reached over and I grabbed that manual that had come with the Amstrad C464, and I started reading it, and I read the commands, and I started getting an interest in the programming side of it. So although my mum was sort of anti-computer, she thought they were really bad for me, you know, in terms of health and obsession. And she's probably right about that, actually. If it wasn't for her saying, why don't you learn to do something else with that computer, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. So there you go.
Oh, there you go. You see, thank you to both our parents. Right, well, we'll wrap that there. That's brought us up to 1994. I mean, we could always do another one. We could stop there. Now I think the journey gets a little bit different now. It's getting more modern, but yeah, look, we've got lots of ideas for future videos. And again, if you like it, please, you know, leave us a little comment. If you've got an idea for a video, let us know. And yeah, we'll see what we can do. But so far, I'm enjoying this new series. It's nice just to have a chat. And that two-part trip down memory lane has been very interesting, Dave. So thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, we'll see you again soon.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.